now I would love to take the honors by introducing the keynote panel. Of course, Dr. Goosen is part of the keynote panel, but first, uh, let me introduce you to the moderator. I personally, I know this gentleman. It's been over a decade since we worked together, and he is a he's a mastermind. He's a guru. He has his influence in multi industries, be it education, government, banking, fintech, and many others. um, a very dear friend and currently an entrepreneur who is leading Gizba in Saudi Arabia. Mr. Javed Abbasi is the founder and program director for Gizba. And with him on this panel, I would love to call back Dr. Matthews Goosen, the chairman of the event, to grace his presence at the on this panel. And with a lot of honor and prestige, privileges, I would love to have request Dr. Majdah Shugdar, the Director General for the Training Department at the Education and Training Evaluation Commission of Saudi Arabia, to grace her presence at this panel. And from Renaissance Learning, we have from the UK, Ms. Margaret Allen, the Curriculum and Education Specialist, to grace her presence out over here. Doctor, sorry, I'm quite used to the word doctor right now, but Javed, it's a privilege to having you, Dr. Goosen, Dr. Majdah, and Margaret. It's fantastic having the three of you here. We are looking forward to a fascinating, fantastic keynote panel. Javed, sir, ladies and gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Fahad. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session. And let me share my screen, and I will quickly go through just few slides because this is more of a discussion. It is not a presentation. So welcome to this Saudi Education Technology session agenda. I believe that there are 4 major points. That is post-COVID-19, that is online education taking over the conventional education, ICT role, future of conventional education, and distance learning in the next 5 years. So means I'm really privileged to have this panel. We have got Dr. Majdah, Director General of Training Department in Education. We have got Dr. Matthew, which you have just seen, and also Margaret Allen, Curriculum and Education Specialist from Renaissance Learning. Now, we will be starting just with 2 slides, and then we will go to the discussion. Just some interesting facts that I want to share with you, that Saudi Arabia currently, if you see that they are spending around 8.8% of its GDP on education as compared to the global average of 4.6, which is nearly double the global average on education. And total budget which they are spending on education is 18.9% of the total budget is being spent. And currently, if you see that post-COVID development that we will be focusing maybe during more in discussion, like Madrasati portal, which is from Ministry of Education, they are catering the entire schools and all of the students throughout the kingdom. A very comprehensive, very strong portal. Acceptance of the single sign-on is there. AI in education is a great breakthrough. Now, I believe that you all know that teaching through poetry and rhyming solution like Pipeer, they are there. And I will be borrowing one, what you call item from the Pipeer itself, that the new changes are brought by the era of post-COVID-19. Distance learning should be fun, simple, easy, and lean. AI advancements surely are going beyond imagination and creating wow experience and laying a solid foundation. Now, to lay the solid foundation, I will be starting as published. Dr. Majdah, can you please share your thought? Because the way we have structured, there are 2 sessions. One is uninterrupted session of 8 minutes to each of the panelists, and after that, we will be starting with a question and answer. That will be a quick question and a quick answer. Dr. Majdah, over to you. Dr. Majdah, we cannot hear you. Can you please?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for this nice introduction, and good morning, Dr. Matthew, Fahad, and Margaret. This great opportunity to be with this outstanding speaker and panelist, and it's really great to share and participate in this kind of a global crisis. So I'm going to just give an introduction about some points that I need to talk about this crisis happened. And then from there, we can, I think, go back to our respected audience to hear from them. So I'm just start with talking about the pandemic as a global health crisis. And this has never happened before. And it's really, as they said, that we are facing many of unknown unknowns. So every day we have a new challenge, and the challenge is really creating a new challenge. Triggers a lot of, a lot of things has been affected from the economic recession, and I think this is one of the biggest happened economic recession in this century. This lengthy lockdown, it was really harsh and causing numerous damage to the people, health, job, economy, and definitely it affects the educational system. And it's really varied from the different level of country. And I'm gonna maybe put some numbers that comes in on March 2020 when the really lockdown happened. So this kind of this challenges happened. It was really affect the global education. This kind of massive educational crisis is really being something new to everybody. According to one of the reports that I mentioned, raised by or actually published by the World Bank in March 28, 2020, about the learning, especially in learning poverty, especially in the low and middle income countries, there was big numbers that was scary. So more than 1.6 billion children are out of school in more than 161 countries. So we're talking about like 80% of the world's enrolled students, they were out of their school. And this is in addition to the challenges that they faced before. They experienced a lot of a problem regarding even finding the fundamental skills that everybody or all other students they have. During this time, they even lack the opportunity to get to the school in addition to the previous challenges that they have. So some of this learning poverty indicators, especially as I said that LMIC, the low and middle income countries before the outbreak started, that the percentage of children who cannot read and understand age 10 stood at 53% of the children. So now what about this crisis? How this really handled in this pandemic that it makes this situation worsen and more? So the crisis of the pandemic actually changed all the norms in the education sectors. It's not only affecting the student, but all the stakeholders, teachers, mothers and fathers, the family, everybody was affected by this one. So it really depends about the level of the countries, but there's no discrimination between the demographic distribution. So everybody was affecting, but maybe the impact was more in the low middle income country. So there are losses of learning, increase of dropout rates. Many children do not have even the simple things that they use it for their study, like the books and the disk. Now they don't have even the internet, the laptop at their homes in order that they can be kept there. They pay a lot of efforts in order to get to the place that they can really take their lessons. So now they don't have it. So what about the richer countries? Actually, different countries, they have different strategies according to the situation and according to the previous preparation for the internet. And one of them, and I can really say proudly in Saudi Arabia, this was really like a great pre-preparation and an adaptation to the pandemic crisis at this time. So they have maybe better preparation for online learning strategies because they use even before the blended strategy between the virtual and the live school, even in many of the universities, not even in all the schools. So the challenges was different from, as I mentioned, it's from different perspective of the stakeholders, from parent, and it depends on the privilege and or actually depends on the level of education and background of the families in order that they can accommodate with the new situation. So unfortunately, this experience was shown in a different way. So it depends that you need to prepare the student, you need to prepare the virtual school, and you need to prepare the mother and father how they can accommodate with a different level. So this kind of inequitable learning circumstances were really control the situation. So what we are going to do with those children who doesn't have the devices or internet connectivity, it really varies from place to place. So I'm going to talk maybe for a while about what happened in Saudi Arabia. The accommodation and of this situation and adaptation was really very quick, was very smart, though it takes the time of the first sense of the crisis, of the lockdown, that within 1 week that everybody has to be home. So even the vendor or the provider, they are not there. And but the smartness of the adaptation system, this was really very remarkable in Saudi Arabia, and I'm talking about even the experience in our Education and Training Evaluation Commission, ETIC, because we were actually facing like more than 300,000 students from different high schools that they have to submit their exam in order, as this is the gatekeeper to get in the universities. So how can we get those people who used to have their exam in the centers that is distributed over Saudi Arabia, and now they have to do it on their laptop. Some of them, they don't have it. Some of them, they are really facing some challenges with the internet, and we have a very clear request regarding the internet speed in their computer. But really, we were very smart to do this in order that we have more than one training session, use the internet with them, making the grouping, give them the pilot and the prototype that they can use it in order that they can really submit their exam. And in a very, short time, we could, let's say, a proper time that we could give them the test or the exam results in order that they can pass to the next stage with the universities. So there was a lot of collaboration from other stakeholders. So the main thing that you can see in Saudi Arabia, especially when I'm talking that now all the governmental sectors, they work as one body, and this was one of the main remarkable success factor in Saudi Arabia, the complementing system or the complementary strategy between everybody. And I'm sure that the backbone was the Ministry of Health in order to keep everybody safe. As you see that every day we have at 1 p.m., we have what they call it the national portal, that everybody from the stakeholders has to be there in order to cut all the rumors that can really disrupt again the social community that we have it. This is maybe what I want really to say in the beginning as a start of my talk. And I think maybe if I pass my time, Javid, you can tell me so I can
Thank you. So thanks a lot. It was really very helpful information. And it was really nice that you have shared some important numbers, like 1.6 billion children were out of school. That is 80% of total world population of the schools were not there. And I really like this one, the blended strategy. And this was really nice. So thanks a lot. Thank you for this very insightful information. Now, may I ask Dr. Matthew that please share your thought as per the published sequence that I'm following right now. Yes, Dr. Matthew, over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me just briefly go through our own experience here. I'm also the acting dean of the College of Science, and so I can maybe give you some of our experiences and how we went about to learn. When we first had to start the classes again, we weren't sure how many in-person classes were available within the university system. And so what we ended up doing for the first week or two, we had everything virtual. And the reason being so that we could find out from the university what classes were available and how many students could we fit in there. And after about 2 weeks or so, we could discover that the smaller classes we could have in person, and then we could also have what's called a rotation of the classes. Some of the problems that we ran into were dealing with, for example, bandwidth, wearing masks, headsets, So these are all things that we had to overcome. One of the instructions that we were given by the senior administration here is that the exams and the midterm exams must be held in person. Okay, and when I say in person, we have to do it, we have to arrange it so that you have enough social distancing and timing. And the reason being is that we found that with online teaching, and students tend to do very well in their tests, but when it comes to in-person tests, the students don't do quite as well. Okay, now you can sort of read between the lines with that one. And so again, we do have our exams and midterms in person, but of course we have it with the proper social distancing. One of the advantages that we found is that some faculty were stuck overseas, out of the country, and luckily because of the whole virtual dynamics, they could still teach their classes. And so whether they were teaching from China, from the US, from the UK, from Canada, and so that has worked out very well. So that's been one advantage of this. With students now, you also have students not just learning like this, but also they have to go into a lab and do things with their hands. Now, so how do you handle this if you have large classes? So what we ended up doing is anywhere from 10 to 50% of the labs, for example, the students could do in person, so that we would rotate the students. So instead of having, let's say, 30 students in a lab, you can have 5 to 10 students in a lab, and then you would rotate them. So in the end, depending on the class sizes, between 10 and 50%, the student would take 10 or 50% of the classes in person. Also learning what to do if a student sends you an email and says, oh, doctor, I've been in contact with a family member who's tested positive. What do we do? So then you have to go back to the Ministry of Health instructions. And we also have a crisis management committee, I think chaired by the president here, to look at emergencies. And so we've also put in place, what does a student do if they've become in contact? You have to quarantine yourself, get tested, and eventually they can come back to some in-person teaching. Another area is dealing with graduate student and thesis defenses. We had it in the past, in-person thesis defenses. Now this has turned out to be quite useful to have a virtual thesis defenses, so that you could make it easier to arrange. People don't physically have to come in. And so that's turned out to be quite successful. On the negative side of graduate students and research is, how does a student go and physically do their experiments in the lab if the lab is closed? Okay, and so sometimes we've had to manage, how do you handle this? Do you modify the objectives, or do you find a lab where the student can do some experiments? And so this has been a bit of a difficulty. Another problem that we've run into, for example, for next semester, for scheduling classes, like we're the College of Science, and so 65% of our classes are service classes for the other colleges. How do you plan this? In a nutshell, we are planning in person. So we are scheduling everything in person, and then we can switch to virtual if we have to. I've been told that if you plan everything virtual and then you have to switch to in person, then it'll become a nightmare. So plan in person and be able to switch to virtual. Okay, let me close off by saying the need for social interaction and for mental health. I see this not only with our students here, but also with my grandchildren. I have grandchildren in Hong Kong and Toronto. If they're stuck at home, they get quite uptight and nervous. Only when they are physically allowed to have some ability to go back and interact with other students, they sort of quiet down a bit. And so there is really a need for some social interaction. However, we really have to keep an eye on students, because they get excited, they get the masks off and they start touching each other. And so yes, it's important to have social interaction, but but we really have to caution students all the time. Please be careful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. It was really awesome. And thank you very much for sharing those practical experience. I believe that our audience are going to benefit from that. Thank you also sharing the strategy, the tactics, and also sharing the challenges what you are facing. And it was really helpful for all of the audience. So thanks again. Now I will invite Margaret. She is from UK. And now we want to listen from Margaret very eagerly that what are your experience from UK, what we can learn from the UK experience, what are your challenges, and how you were able to overcome those challenges. Over to you, Margaret.
Thank you very much. I'm a primary school teacher by background, so I need to have pictures, and I hope that the pictures might help form an image in your mind of what it's been like in the UK. And I looked at the website and I looked at some of the documentation, and I can see how committed the ministry are in Saudi to ensure that children are fit and ready and effective to learn and receive the learning that their teachers are offering. But the bit that stood out for me were this modern life requirements. And I think we could think about that for a long time, either the last 15 years or the last 10 months. And modern life requirements have taken a huge shift. I love this image, and I'd like you to think of teaching and learning with this image. Teachers are effective, the foundations are strong. The roof is on to make sure that children are protected and safe. But at the moment in the UK, the walls feel a bit wobbly and the windows aren't quite fitting. And that's because of this terrible disease, COVID. How have we coped? It has been challenging. Like has already been discussed, in March, we had 2 days notice. Schools had 2 days notice to turn around and make effective learning provision for the children in their care. When you think about the very young children in primary schools, this is particularly challenging. They're not used to sitting in front of a screen. They need first-hand experience. They need practical application of their learning. They need to be engaging with their peers. And so it was very challenging for schools to ensure that children had access to resources. Not all children have access to technology. There may be one phone or one tablet to be shared between 3 children. Had schools made provision for logins? Was there provision to ensure that everybody was being included? The government was very keen to ensure that key worker children were still going to school in order to keep the hospitals running, and key industries effective in trying to keep some of the elements like shops and key elements of the industries working and efficient. Schools still had to stay open. So children were arriving, all different year groups, all different backgrounds, and they had to be accommodated. So teachers not only had to teach those children, but they were also making provision for those children at home who, as I say, weren't used to sitting in front of a screen. And some children weren't supported in the same way. Maybe life isn't fair, but for some children, not having access to computers, not having access to a supportive environment made it very challenging for teachers. And as Dr. Matthews has already said, that mental well-being, the health and care of those children. Teachers were very stressed, and I think they did an amazing job. In June, the government announced that schools would open at primary level only, but only for 5 and 6-year-olds and only for 10 and 11-year-olds. So schools had very little notice again to quickly make their schools COVID secure for that small proportion of children. In larger schools, it could have been as many as 200. But in some, it was only 20 or 30. But the same work had to be made in order to ensure that it was safe, it was clean, it was functioning. Children worked in small bubbles, and teachers were still maintaining contact with children at home, as well as the children in school. And then September came and everybody was going back to school. Was it fair? No, because there were all sorts of anomalies. Inevitably, there were anomalies. Some parents were less anxious as they had been previously in the summer. The disease was showing itself in its true colours, but there was not so much angst, I don't believe. However, there were challenges, and in some ways, teachers say now it's more challenging that the children are in school because they've got to make provision for the children in school. But if a child needs to stay at home because the house has had a positive test or somebody's shielding, the provision still needs to be made for those children. And so teachers are stressed. They are working around the clock. The additional funding that's required to ensure that rooms are clean. Where do children have their lunch? When children are sitting in bubbles, do they move when they're in reading and then they're very good mathematicians? Can they stay in the same bubble? Are they all in one room? When children access school in the morning, are they all coming through the same door? No. Extra staff has been put on for schools where there's several, if there are several entrances to a school, fantastic. You can have them all coming in. But schools are having staggered starts and staggered finishes. That means that staff aren't having the same exchanges with each other as they would normally. The support network that would normally be so strong in a staff room isn't happening. And although I know it's not the case in Saudi Arabia, winter has started here. So the guidelines state that windows and doors should be kept open to allow for that free flow of air, but the heating has still got to be put on. So heating is being used at a tremendous rate. Children are being asked to wear extra layers. But who's paying for that? Where will that come from? Schools are already stretched with their budgets. And I show this picture really just to say, we must communicate. We must continue to communicate. Teachers are struggling. Teachers have got a lot of pressure on their shoulders. Here was a statement from somebody on Twitter at the weekend. They want to do the right thing for their children. They want to ensure, what about children like this? We've all got those children. They know everything. They want to do everything. How do we cope for them? But we've got those children that hide in the background and we don't really know who they are. And this is used often for assessment.
Excellent. It was.
I just want to finish with saying that.
Please, it was, yeah, please.
Thank you. That's the word I believe is core to everything that's going on at the moment, stamina.
So thanks a lot, Margaret. It was really very helpful, and it is an important point that you have raised, that earlier we used to say one man, one computer. Now it is one child, one computer. And yes, this is a big challenge, and the computer should be of a reasonable configuration. And I remember that before COVID-19, we used to say for children that you have to minimize your screen time. And the way you have just mentioned, yes, now we cannot say that minimize your screen time. And especially the point that you have raised, that children, especially, they want interaction, not the screen time. So these are the practical challenges. And I believe here we will be opening the floor for question and answer. I will be asking Fahad if you have any question, please.
Hi, Javed. While I get the Q&A panel up, I mean, we can continue our discussions. You can just carry on. I'll
Please.
follow you on the questions.
Okay, I will be coming to you, Dr. Majdah. Based on your experience, what you have just explained, that what are your top 3 priority these days in order to address the challenges and the issues? Dr. Majdah, please.
Yes, I think first thing, we have to be very realistic, and we have really to know exactly what are the situation from the Ministry of Health. So we don't need to exaggerate, and at the same time, we don't need to underestimate what is the situation. Now, as you know, now the precaution policies from the MOH become more, I don't want to see lenient, but maybe because this is, they know now what is the size of the risk. So regarding the test of the positive test, and what is the the quarantine requirements. So first of all, we need to know what are the protection criteria from the Ministry of Health that we need to take it and really need to implement it. So we will not go beyond the expectation and make everybody panic. The second, regarding the education on a different level of education, when we talk about the K-12 to universities, we have really to identify what could be the things that can be provided through the virtual learning. But as Margaret mentioned, that we have to communicate. And I'm going to say, just yesterday, and I was in a meeting, and I said all the virtual meetings should be only something temporary, but it cannot replace the live communication. It's completely different when we are face to face, and this is what we have really to decide. So we have to plan how to minimize this as much as that we can take the precaution now, as maybe Dr. Matthew and Margaret mentioned. This is now, it's in our life, and I don't think that we will end. So we have now to manage ourselves to live with this one. And the third one, to identify.
Excellent, good.
Yeah, who are the stakeholders that has to be prepared?
That's good. Now we are starting our rapid fire, that is quick question and quick answer. Dr. Matthew, if you can answer this one, that what is the role of ICT in realizing the education and how that will lead the kingdom to achieve Vision 2030 goals? Of course, it cannot be a very quick one, Dr. Matthew, but yes, within a minute, what will be your answer? This is coming from the floor. Dr. Matthew, your mic is off.
Okay, let me address it from the point of view of 2030. We are here as teachers to train students, generate intellectual property, and use that in the economic development of the country. And I think as teachers, educators, we are taking part in all of this, okay? So we are here to train and teach students. We are here to develop intellectual property. And at the same time, we have to work with companies and stuff to develop new products and new businesses that will help the country. And I think the whole virtual business and the computers are there to help us, but we have to do it as persons, as people.
So thanks a lot. The next question, Margaret, may I ask you that how you see the education learning in the next 5 years?
Gosh, that's a big one. When does COVID finish is how I'd like to respond with that. But I think that what we need to do is ensure that our children are ready for the next 5 years. And I do think that sometimes the primary end of the market gets forgotten. I think people forget what it's like to be in a primary school. And I do believe that those early years are crucial in ensuring that children are fit and effective learners. And that can only happen if the right funding is put in there. It's not always about exam sitting and testing. It's also about making sure children have the right exposure. Do they have enough books at home? If they haven't got books at home, do they have a digital library? Reading is core to everything. And I do believe that the whole aspect of COVID has exposed the requirements for young children. Young children do not learn well in isolation. They need to be put
Yes, I agree. Thanks a lot. Really insightful. Now the next question coming from the floor. Majdah, this is for you. How to make distance learning and virtual school a success in the kingdom? Doctor, please.
Yeah. Yes, Rafiq. I think this is very important. Like what Saudi Arabia, they are creating a lot of possible delivery modes. But this is, again, it requires a lot of infrastructure that need to exist. But actually, a lot of lesson plans, using different videos, tutorials, and the resources that are available to be used by the students. So as I mentioned, that it will vary from country to country, but actually we have to identify a lot of models and delivery modes that the student, that they will not even lose the interest in order that they can be engaged and attract. And honestly, there are a lot of things of comics that we see it, that like some of the students, they have like every 5 minutes, they have to call the student by name to open the camera, and they oblige everybody to put the camera on so they feel that they are still in the class. I think it's a new strategy and it's a new era in the education that you can consider that people will live in a two different world. So as I can summarize, the delivery mode has to be more creative, and there are a lot of measurement that you have to use it to ensure that the delivery really becomes like to ensure the learning outcomes that planned before even the student gets in the class, but with a different delivery mode.
That's good. So I believe that we are running out of time. So what I will do, that we have got around 3 to 4 minutes left. So I really want each of the participants to just share their, would be the takeaway message, how you will summarize maybe a one or two liner. If I can start with you, Dr. Matthew, that what should be the takeaway from this session? What is the message that you want to give? Maybe a one-liner or a two-liner, what people they should remember, they can apply right away, please. Dr. Matthew.
I think we can agree on that the hybrid teaching is here, some form of it is here to stay. Having said this, it's the some in-person interaction is really critical. Now, not only for exams, but for the mental and social health of our students. Thank you.
Excellent. Dr. Majdah, what is the takeaway message?
I think I'm going to repeat one thing, that this pandemic was not discriminate demographically or geographically. So again, it's a catalyst. It's not only all negative, it's a catalyst for development, a strategic educational interdependency, really to leverage the collective strength in different ways in order to make this a success story and to learn from this crisis. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Margaret, a takeaway message, yes, please.
So I'm going to use a picture again, and I want to say that I think it's important that all children should be dealt with as individuals. We mustn't just lump them together as one group. So who is your goldfish? Who is your monkey? And what is that elephant in the room that needs to be addressed? They must be treated as individuals, and this COVID-19 hasn't helped that. Please keep remembering that.
So thanks a lot. I believe that with that, we will be coming to the end of this one. And I can share a quick message from my side, from the moderator, like the way we have said earlier, the final message, which I can say, this is again a new way of teaching, which is there, that now they are rhyming everything. Like a pipe here and other, that I get this message from there. Saudi Arabia is spending on the education in the world is best. It is setting the trend, and it's the role model for the rest. The AI-based learning and new innovation like pipe here, the Saudi education is now certainly in top gear. And in this top gear, we are going to listen to other participants throughout the day. I'm really thankful to Dr. Matthew, Dr. Majdah, and Margaret for sharing their experience. It was a very insightful session, and there was so many practical tips which were there. So thanks a lot, everyone.